This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Can I welcome everyone to the Police and Crime Committee meeting. This morning we'll be holding a discussion on how the Metropolitan Police Service's Cyber Crime Unit is protecting London from online fraud. Please could everybody make sure that you have your electronic devices and that if you have them that they switch to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. Can I now ask our clerk, Lauren Harvey, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies today from Assemblymember Cooper and Assemblymember Lord Duval.
Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interest to declare? Thank you. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of February 2026 to be signed by me as a correct record? Thank you. Can we note the completed, ongoing and closed actions arising from previous meetings of the committee? We now move on to our main item of business, and I'd like to welcome our guests. Firstly, Rory Innes, Chief Executive Officer and founder of the Cyber Helpline. Ruth Halcon, Research Manager for the Police Foundation. Will Line, Head of Economic and Cybercrime for the Metropolitan Police Service. Detective Chief Inspector Lara Zanadakis, who is the Report Fraud Stakeholder Manager for the City of London Police, and Detective Superintendent Oliver Little, who is the Lead Force Operations Room National Coordination City of London Police. Welcome all. We'll start with questions on the background and the types of fraud and the impact of AI. I'll start the questions, and they are to all of you. And what I would ask, because we've got quite a lot to get through, is if you could keep your answers quite brief. What is the current picture of online fraud in London? And I wonder, Oliver, would you like to start?
Thank you for the invitation today. So we can provide some detailed figures from our annual assessment. So in 2009, we moved to a system for fraud reporting to have it all centralised within one service, which was Action Fraud, and that's recently been replaced with Report Fraud. What that enables us to do is to have reporting from victims up and down the country into one place. So we then categorise that. In around 2012, we added cybercrime reporting into that. So we're able to give a comprehensive picture, and we have an official rated annual assessment document we can share with members. So that assessment took place over the summer, so we can provide an updated figure annually for that. In terms of London specifically, it's difficult to be precise, but we would say that as a working average, about 40% of the national crime victimisation is within Greater London. So that's the kind of the context of it. So there's lots of different figures I can give you around the impact of fraud and cybercrime. It's really about what you're specifically focused on. So there's lots of different types and categorisations of fraud we can go into, investment fraud, romance fraud, and some of those kind of other cyber enabled crimes and specific crimes like social media hacking. So there's a lot of information we've got available. It's about understanding the bits you're really interested in, and maybe if we can provide that.
What we'll come on to the typologies in a moment, but thank you. Lara, did you have anything to add to that from City of London Police?
Thank you very much for inviting us. I think what's really, really important is to focus on the new national reporting system. So that, of course, is for cybercrime and fraud. It's a completely transformational, brand new system from beginning to end, really focusing on victim journey and that every report counts. So if it's not disseminated for a pursue, really focusing on the other Ps within policing, how we can prevent it, protect, prepare, disrupt, take down. So that's the really big focus and exciting new journey.
Thank you. Will?
Hi, good morning. So, just a little bit to add. So, nationally, there in the previous Action Fraud system, which has now been replaced, as Lara mentioned, there's kind of about 350,000 reports of fraud nationally for the year 24 to 2025. It's an increase of just about 1% from the previous year, and about 50,000 cyber-dependent crimes, which is an increase of 60% from the previous year. London, we think, is probably disproportionately affected by this. So specific crime type, fraud type called courier fraud, for example, we estimate from the work that we've done within the Metropolitan Police that around 60% of courier fraud victims are located in London or the wider region. And there's about 55,000 reports of fraud and about 10,000 reports of cybercrime from within that subset of data from the national reporting level that we think is focused in London. So, as Ollie mentioned, we think it's a really significant percentage of the overall national total impacting our city.
Okay, thank you. Ruth?
Great to be here, and thank you so much for the invite. Just to add that fraud exists on a continuum, so lots of offences are online and offline. So they might have elements of both. They might start in person, then move to online. So it's a bit of a misnomer to talk about online fraud, because you could say up to 70, 80% of frauds have an online element, and maybe even more, depending on how you measure that.
Thank you. Rory.
Hi. So the Cyber Helpline is a charity that supports victims of cybercrime. And we've operated a 18-month pilot in London supporting victims when they fall victim. I think it's really important to understand it's a huge problem. As it's already been said, 40% of crime is in this space. But we think from our data, only 36% of those who fall victim will report to the police. And so we expect that the numbers that you will hear around reporting are probably about a third of the real numbers of victims. So there are hundreds of thousands of victims in London every year, and millions of victims across the UK. One thing I think is really important to represent from the victim side is that while this is seen as an economic crime, a financial crime, the impact of these crimes is often on mental health, it's on online confidence, and it's on the ability for people to live their day-to-day life. And the response needed isn't just about recovering money, it's about helping that individual piece their life back together.
Thank you. My second question is, what emerging fraud typologies, including AI-enabled scams and deepfake impersonation, present the greatest risk to Londoners? I am going to start again with Oliver, because you started to go into this.
So I think if we look across the last kind of 15 years, we've seen an acceleration of the number of people using more and more technology to enable fraud, because it enables people to attack a much wider number of people at once, and they can play a numbers game. So it's really attractive to them. It also enables them to put lots of barriers in the way between us and them and obfuscate who they really are and layer up the deception. If you look at technology, I suppose the easiest example to use would be the hi mum scams, which people are familiar with as a sort of text message. If you see them, there's the potential to use technology to turn that into a really realistic interpretation of someone's real voice. So you get to that point where it's going to be easier for people to be manipulated. I think there's still quite a lot of kind of fairly basic rudimentary frauds that are effective as well. But I think the challenge for us as law enforcement is to use technology ourselves to identify and respond. Fundamentally, fraudsters that we're talking about, those kind of mass attack people, they'll use models and systems to increase the surface area of their attack. And that means that we can use systems and models to identify and detect that. So it's always shifting and changing. I think those... the challenge for us in terms of reporting is that often victims are not aware that AI or complex technology has been used to deceive them. They're aware they've been deceived. So what they tell us is about their subjective experience. So it's up to us to work with private sector partners and lots of people to understand what is out there, what people are using, and how we can be strategically effective in mitigating that. So, but I think you can imagine yourself in terms of the use of technology to obfuscate who you are and increase your attack, and then to move money and value really quickly away from law enforcement. So that's the kind of the arms race that we see ourselves in, I suppose, from my perspective.
Thank you. Do any of the other member of the panel want to? Will and then Ruth.
Yes, so within the London area, we have 6 priority fraud types that we're really focused on that we think pose the greatest risk to the public in our city. So that's romance fraud, courier fraud, which is sometimes also known as police impersonation or banking staff impersonation fraud, investment fraud, abuse of position fraud, payment diversion, and card and payment fraud are the 6 types. And I think just 3 trends that I'd really quickly highlight in terms of how the threat is changing for us. Firstly, there's a hybridization of these fraud types. So previously, these frauds operated as standalone kind of like criminal business models, whereas now we're increasingly seeing them blend together. So often it can be very unclear as to what type of scam somebody's falling victim to until they've actually been victimized, whereas previously we'd be able to understand that much, much earlier. So there's a blending together of those different threats together, and the blending with other threat types that aren't fraud related. Second would be the increasing use of crypto. So we see cryptocurrency now features in around a third of all of our investment fraud reports. So your cryptocurrency does two really key things. For people that are operating on the internet, it allows you to trade with each other as criminals much more easily than you could previously. And it's a really powerful tool for you to be able to cash out or realise your ill-gotten gains as a criminal without having to use previous methods like the traditional banking system and things like that. And then lastly, there's kind of AI, which features in kind of like lots of our conversations nowadays. And although we're not yet seeing AI running kind of end-to-end fraud models, so this isn't AI kind of like going out and victimizing people on behalf of criminals, we are seeing AI as a tool that optimizes and enhances and increases the scale and sophistication of different steps within the fraud business model that these criminals are undertaking. So lots of frauds that involve access to victim machines, access to victim computers, for example. AI and some AI tooling that's really quite freely available and cheap for criminals to rent really enables you to operate at a much greater scale than perhaps you did in the past. So, it optimizes and increases the sophistication and scalability of different steps of the fraud business model without AI. Definitely don't want to give the perception that AI is out there kind of like running fraud operations on behalf of criminals. But I think that is a realistic possibility that we're going to get there at some point in the future. So those are our 6 priority fraud types, and then kind of like 3 broad trends that I wanted to highlight.
Thank you. Ruth.
So following on from that, I researched the health impact of fraud, and we actually spoke to victims who had personal experiences of both those types of frauds. So there was, in terms of the investment fraud, there was an elderly gentleman who'd come across a video he thought was Martin Lewis advertising this particular fraud. And because it was someone who was credible, it seemed to be just much invested a large sum of money. And he eventually got it back, but there was a great deal of trauma and suffering involved in that process. And that was just a mass market one. It was sent out, loads of people seen the video, and because of the personal circumstances he was in at that particular time, he was susceptible. And at the other end of the scale, there was a romance fraud, and the AI technology was used as a way of getting over her suspicion, her doubt this person was real, that she was falling in love with. He'd sent short videos of what he thought was him, and she didn't necessarily know that technology could do this, so she believed him. And if actually this man was stolen the identity of a Mexican soap star to gradually groom her, and then she lost a vast amount of money as a result of this. But it was the way that AI was used to undermine her defences gradually over a long period, and that was a couple of years ago. Technology was quite basic then. It was only a very short video, so who knows what could happen now.
Thank you. Very sad. Rory.
I think it's really important to understand that when we think of cybercrime and online fraud, we often think of technical hackers, cyber criminals. I would argue, and from our experience, supporting thousands of victims a month in this space and a lot in London, is that these criminals are better at marketing than they are at technology. They understand what is going to make you believe them, what is going to make you click, what is going to make you do something that enables that crime. And so, the thousands and thousands of people that we've helped in London, the criminals probably had a phone, a social media account, and an email account, and that is enough, and that is causing devastating impacts, including loss of life, loss of finances, mental health. So if you, and as Will quite rightly said, the opportunity of where AI could get to, and so think how easy it is right now to take a clip of someone, and there's probably clips of all of us online, and then create a real video, voice, identity, and where that could go, where instead of having to talk to a criminal as a rate-limiting step for the criminal, you can just be chatting to an AI bot and think you're talking to a real person. So there are absolutely scary threats coming down the line, But the really simple, non-technical threats now are devastating, and the amount of help that we're giving those victims isn't enough. So it's a huge, huge issue.
Thank you. And my final question, I'm going to open it out to you as a panel. In a recent report, PwC stated that a single chatbot could deliver the same scam volume that would previously have required a call centre of people. How concerned are you about the potential of AI to increase the volume of online fraud in London? I know you've all touched on this a little bit, but if we could just go into it a little bit more and sort of do a deep dive. So who'd like to start on that? Will?
Yeah, so I'd really echo Roy's point that the level of sophistication of a fraud or a scam doesn't correlate with the harm that it causes. So that's a really important point to remember, that just because you fall victim to a AI scam, or you may fall victim to someone scamming you out of money at your front door, we shouldn't conflate that. The more sophisticated something is, definitely doesn't correlate to the more harmful it is. So that's really important for us in terms of calibrating our response. But yeah, I think AI is a real concern. And I think, what is it really good at? It is really good at injecting automation and scalability into things where, with social media and the different vectors by which scammers are now able to get in touch with victims, that's really difficult for us to try to mitigate. How do you stop people getting in touch with people when we all live our lives to an extent on the internet? Lots of people's information is freely available to people online. And yeah, AI definitely introduces a scalability element into fraud that did exist to an extent in the past. They've always been able to leverage tools, but AI, I think, and have new tooling that's really available. I'm sure people have used it. It really lowers the barrier of entry to be able to harness some of those tools and capabilities. And so it may not be the fact that lots of these scams are getting more sophisticated, but more scammers are going to be able to harness that technology through the lower barrier of entry than they have done before. So that, what does this technology do? It lowers the barrier of entry into some of this type of offending, and it really proliferates capability for these scammers, fraudsters, threat actors to come and get after victims.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to, Rory?
Yeah, I think there's a whole range of perpetrators in this space, from individuals who are ex-partners and known to the victim. But we know there are organised criminal gangs who are running scams and frauds at scale now. These are professional groups that are run like organisations who are using the latest technology to be as efficient and low cost as possible. And every business in London is looking at AI and large language models and how it can lower their cost and improve service. It's the ability to scale and replace human effort and really closely mimic human interaction that is the really dangerous bit here. Because if you think about a lot of these scams, it is thinking you've received a job in a fake interview and then paying to do a security check, or it is falling in love with someone online and sending them money because they're in trouble. It's that ability to mimic that human relationship and behaviour and create that fake identity. You can do that at scale, and you don't need a criminal on the phone or on text or email. Then your ability to reach more victims and be much more successful in those attacks because of how real it is and because of the data you can take in about that individual from their social media profile, LinkedIn, what's out there about them. There's a chance that it will be higher scale, more effective, but it's extremely low cost, and the risk involved in getting caught is extremely low. So it's a pretty good future if you're an organised criminal gang in this space.
Thank you. Assemblymember Garbett.
Thank you. You've touched on it a little bit there, but I just wondered if anyone could just briefly, because we've got lots of other questions to go deeper into this, but give us a sense of who the perpetrators and the victims are. Has anyone got a sense? I know lots of it will be that lots of victims don't come forward and there's loads of kind of shame involved in that, and we'll get into that later. But you touched on it a little bit there, Rory, but I just didn't know if anyone just had I think there's some assumptions I've got about who the victims are, but I just think it would be good to actually know what the experience is.
So from our research, The victims can be anyone and everyone. You've got the idea that fraud victims are little old ladies who don't really know how to use a computer. But actually, some research we've done based on crime survey data suggests that people in the middle age, so sort of 40s, 50s, into the 60s, are probably the most vulnerable. But also, there's a rising number of young people who are being targeted. So Crest and the City of London Police did some research recently, which suggested that 88% of young people they interviewed and they surveyed under the age of 21 had encountered fraudulent content online. And actually, only 6% of them didn't report, so only a tiny amount did report. So young people being scammed is being seen as normal, as part of being online. And they are being harmed in various ways, their mental, physical, emotional well-being, but they just see it as normal, so they're not seeking help, not reporting it. So again, this is a much larger problem than little old ladies.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with Ruth there. It's a real wide amount of victims. We've got a big breakdown, again, what Ollie said earlier in our annual assessment, and I think that's where we've got to be very open-minded, that it can affect everybody at various different fraud types, and it's about how we really encourage the underreporting for people to report, because if they report into the national system, we can see the data, we can look at the threats, the trends, and we can then be more proactive in regards to the educational pieces, the empowerment, making sure that people who would feel either embarrassed to report or so shocked that it couldn't happen to them because it's so impactful, so they can see and feel confident that they know where to go, where the advice is, where the protect messaging is, and that will then allow us to be able to see where the true pictures are and then prioritise accordingly. So I think for me the biggest takeout is that underreporting has to be really improved and encouraged so we can see that true threat and trend.
I think Rory was just going to come in. Rory was going to come in.
Yeah. Sorry, Rory. Yeah, so I think all of that is exactly right. I think it impacts all demographics, for sure. I think we also have to understand that roughly a third report. And in this online fraud space, the older you are, the more likely you are to report to the police. And so that misconception that this is older people who are less confident online are the people who are going to fall victim, they're just more likely to report, and so we see it through that lens. If we look at the London pilot that we ran for 18 months, it was women between 25 and 39 who were the big group that we were supporting. If we look at that through the lens of online fraud, we see it as a pretty even split, 56% male, 44% female. Again, 25 to 39 being that key age group. But there is a huge problem in 13 to 20-year-olds, and particularly with males, around sextortion. And that is one of the highest crime types that we deal with and has a huge impact. And I was just talking to a mother last week who had lost her son to suicide over a £200 scam around sextortion. So these are really, really impactful crimes. I think it's a really, really huge issue, and it does cover all demographics. The challenge with reporting is that reporting has to lead somewhere. And so that reporting cannot be dead end. And if we look at that situation right now, 87% of those who report to action fraud or now report fraud get an immediate no further action decision. And that rises to 98.1%. So when we do get people reporting, for the majority of them, we say, there's nothing we can do, we can't help. That's the engagement that needs to change here.
So just one thing to add. So in terms of businesses as victims, I think we see a danger point as businesses get to a certain point of growth. So SMEs are more vulnerable, particularly because they don't have the scale to invest in the protection measures. So I think that's an important point to put in, because this is, it's a brake on growth in some ways. It's a significant issue for businesses, some of which will go out of business because of the fraud losses they might suffer. I think it's really important. When I first got into this area, I guess the stereotype was men, the kind of late 40s and 50s, who had the money to spend and were more risk-taking, would get drawn into investment scams. But those kind of stereotypes aren't really very helpful. There's victimisation across the different demographics, and we can break that down category by category. But I think going back to the point Rory made there, it's a complicated system in the way we deal with it. There's a massive scale challenge for us. I think we need to make sure we don't fall into a trap of kind of the council of despair that this is a really mismatched kind of challenge we've got. A traditional reactive law enforcement investigation is not always the best way to deal with everyone's report. There's a huge amount that goes on within the law enforcement response, which would be really encouraging to all of you here and victims. We can't always show people what it is we're doing. Rory's absolutely right in those figures. But that no further action in traditional reactive law enforcement, a cop comes to your house, takes a statement, then goes and arrests the person. That's not the only thing we can do. And a lot of the time we're making strategic choices about the most effective response.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Small-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, panel. Thank you for joining us. I think this is such an important topic. Ruth, in your answer before, you mentioned Martin Lewis, and I presume that referred to the 2018-19 Facebook case, where his image was used, and then there was a subsequent legal battle over that. Obviously, the pace of technological change since then has been huge, and deepfakes are leaps and bounds beyond what they would have been 6-7 years ago. Has the legislation kept pace with that technological change?
It is beginning to wake up. So with the Online Harms Bill, there has been some reference to deepfakes. But I think it's, again, legislation is always playing to play catch-up. The criminals aren't necessarily bound by the same rules and structures and bureaucracy. And in the case of policing, the fact that there are still 43 different forces, 43 different ways of doing it, and the fact that lots of crime is international, often the criminals are overseas, so they're bound by different regulatory frameworks or none at all. And so we always will be playing catch-up. So what obviously pursuing legislation is the right thing to do. Obviously, you've got to have, it's only part of your arsenal of weapons, as it were.
Given that, could you see some merit in potentially having an international framework for dealing with something like deepfakes, which is going to affect everyone across the globe?
Very much so. And I think, again, there has been movement in the space, certainly with the European AI Act. But I think getting legislation through internationally is always hard. And Interpol, again, do work in this space. But it's always a battle, especially in the current state of the world as well.
Please.
Just to add to that, I kind of like the concept of waking up because it says you've probably been asleep for a period of time. And I think we have to think about how we protect people from technology. And the model we have right now is you can release that technology, it can cause lots of harm, and then 5-10 years later we will try and make some fixes. That's not the same in other industries. You can't release a car if you haven't safety tested it, you haven't crash tested it, it doesn't meet international standards. And we are seeing lots of technologies arriving at pace in this space without any safeguards whatsoever for victims. And that puts huge strain on policing, puts huge strain on charities, but it devastates real people and businesses. So I think the future of this is going to have to be when do we let people release these technologies on real people, and do they need to prove that they can meet and handle certain risks that individuals might face in these areas.
And obviously we're talking about fraud this morning, but I think that's been true with the Grok incidents recently around explicit images. And yeah, I mean, you can't do it with a car, you can't do it with pharmaceuticals. I don't know why you can do it with tech. To the City of London Police and the Met, how do the police identify and record AI involvement in online fraud cases? Because it could be quite a challenge, I would imagine, knowing that someone has used AI in a particular crime. And what specific challenges prevent reliable identification and recording?
So we've got a national recording system for victims which range from my mother-in-law who's in her 80s and managing a lifelong mental health condition to a high street bank or a business. So it's a really broad user base. Some people know exactly what's happened to them to a really good degree of detail and can provide fantastic actionable intelligence. Other people, you're talking about, fragments of what they can piece together from what's happened, depending on what kind of support network they've got around them. So it's a really varied picture. And part of the challenge is for a lot of people, they won't necessarily know what technology has been used as part of the deception that they've fallen victim to. So that's where we know from international engagement, we're probably one of the best countries in the world at capturing the victim experience. But what we need to do is work with private sector partners and threat intelligence companies to understand overseas, because these kind of challenges, these themes are international. The offenders don't really care about where their victim is. But I think that's what I'd say. But Will, I don't know if you or Lara?
Yeah, I'd just touch a bit on what Ollie said. So with the new report fraud, we've really taken the victim-centric right at the heart. So the new question sets, like Ollie said, they've been reviewed now. So people shouldn't be expected to know exactly what's happened to them. We shouldn't have a blocker for them to report. So it's about getting those questions right at the beginning. So we worked with academia, we worked with charities to understand and ensure that nobody was a blocker to reporting. The system automatically asks the questions, and we then can pick up, because the system's smart enough to know what type of fraud code it is, and then subsequently what specified protect messaging can be given straight away to that victim, be it an individual or a business. That's absolutely crucial and critical. We then have the victim services embedded within the system. So again, where there's vulnerabilities, where there's safeguarding, all those type of things, we can pick up that straight away at the point of reporting and allow that to continue with the victim throughout that journey. So that is absolutely crucial. It's not just that reporting system and service, it's that whole victim journey, what we can do to protect them, provide advice, guide them to the different areas and charities to make sure that we provide that support.
Not a huge amount to add into it. It's really, really difficult to understand whether AI is being utilised. If they've been utilising a deep fake of a famous footballer and entered into a relationship with them, it can become immediately obvious that AI has been utilised in that case. If AI has been used to automate a phishing message that they replied to 6 months ago with a little bit of personalisation from some data that they've taken from the internet on that individual to make it more likely that you're going to engage with that spam email that I think everyone's probably getting into their inboxes kind of all the time, really difficult to recognise that. But reporting is a challenge. I think Rory's totally right. There's the Crime Survey of England and Wales says about 5.5 million incidents of cyber and fraud in the UK nationally every year. And we know that London is a really significant percentage of that, whether it's between 20 and 40%, something like that. And I totally support the comments that Ollie and Lara said in terms of, getting a better understanding of the victimisation and what's happened to people is a really important element. It's not the sole element for us. The system doesn't revolve around this, but it's a massively important piece of the puzzle in terms of understanding the scale of different problems, allowing us to target our response and be more precise and data-driven in our response as best as possible, and have a better understanding of the threats so that we can understand those business models and seek to disrupt them in the most strategically impactful way possible for ultimately to deliver the best impact for Londoners.
And you mentioned those phishing messages, often I think targeted at romance fraud. Are they being undertaken by chatbots? I mean, they seem to happen at such a scale that they seem automated.
Yeah, there is an element of automation. It's not necessarily AI. It's just could just be standard kind of like automation processes. And of course, there's lots of commercially available tools that are easily abused by cyber criminals and fraudsters that allow you to contact people at scale of many millions at any one point in time. In the same way that there are capabilities that allow people to send text messages and WhatsApp messages that I don't know if members have seen those, where it's kind of hi, it's Mum, I've lost my phone, I'm using this number. Again, it's all just abusing scalability technology that allows you to access victims. To make money from people, which is what the threat actors want, you have to initially be able to get in touch with them.
And like you alluded to, I mean, some of them can be, I think, quite obvious if you know what to look for. But I think if AI is deployed to really personalise them and understand much more about your personal circumstances, there's a lot of information available about people online. You can see a situation where they become much more sophisticated and can do much more damage.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that: who are potential victims, who's vulnerable. I think my really clear message is everyone is vulnerable. Everyone is vulnerable. Just certain groups and certain sectors and certain individuals, demographics may be more vulnerable. But we should be really, really clear that this is a problem that can impact anyone. If you think you're tech savvy, you work in the cybersecurity sector, or you don't use a computer at all, right? I think everyone is susceptible to this type of criminality. It's the most common type of crime that people in London and people around the UK are most likely to encounter and unfortunately most likely to be a victim of.
Yeah, absolutely, Rory.
And just to add to that, absolutely right. And what is happening now is we have protections in place to try and catch these emails, spam filtering, detection engines that are trying at the point of entry into your inbox to spot, is this a scam? Is this likely dangerous for an individual? Where we are starting to see more AI and machine learning is on how to beat those defensive systems. And so not only is when the email lands, is it more effective at making you do something, it's actually more effective at getting into your inbox in the first place, because that arms race between attack and defence. And so that is a battle that will rage for a very long time, I think.
And banks have been using AI to detect fraudulent activity for several years. Are the police using similar tools, and how are they working with banks and other financial organisations to tackle online fraud?
I think what's really important is the collaboration, public, private sector. City of London Police is quite unique in regards to that. So we have funded units, for example, and with our system we now have an automatic alert system that's been built in for the banking sector that's just been released. So literally if someone reports, a bank account is included, that it gets extracted automatically and sent to the bank, so then they can make that decision, because it's about also that repatriation rather than reimbursement. So I think that collaboration, public-private, is absolutely crucial and critical. The new system, again, we take data in from external companies like Cyfast, like UK Finance. We've got very good working relationships, and I think that's really important to close that circle. So we share the data and we dare to share.
I think it's really important. Lots of traditional crime or geographically specific crime where you have to be next to someone to commit it is different. And I think we have to think about it a little bit differently to non-geographically specific crime, of which, the vast majority of fraud, all cybercrime all takes place on the internet. And if it comes to things like drug trafficking networks, we know the kind of like law enforcement in the UK working with partners across the system. We know the kind of fields they're grown in, the trafficking routes they come to the UK, the big organised crime groups that deal with them, all the way down to kind of like street level users and dealers. I think we are the competent authority on that. When it comes to online criminality, we absolutely recognise we have to partner with partners across the public sector, whilst also partnering really, really closely with the private sector, because they have a really critical role to play in terms of helping us both understand the problem and also deliver the most effective response. So that's, as I think Lara said, kind of like quite culturally different for us, and it's different to the way that we fight traditional crime. But I think we've come a really, really long way in terms of being more open and being far, far more collaborative in our fight against this than we ever have been in the past.
I'll just add a couple of examples. So there's something called the banking protocol. So we know that some people get groomed and talked into giving banking staff in branches a certain set of lines to access money for kind of laundering purposes, or if they're in the spell of a fraud. And so there's methodology shared from the police to the banks to their frontline staff. When they identify that, there's a protocol that they can contact the local police, and then there's a response there to try and intercede with that kind of situation. We all know when we try and make a payment or make a purchase for something that's kind of outside of the norm, then there's a set of processes that will kick in with your online banking. That's because we're all engaged in a kind of collaborative effort to share our understanding of what the threats are, so that they can put those steps in place to stop it before it turns into a loss. And as Lara mentioned, for over 20 years there's been a partnership between the Metropolitan Police, City London Police and retail banks to have a dedicated unit that started off looking at people who were using Lebanese loops around cash points. That was the start point of the DCPCU. That's evolved to the point now where they are they're going out proactively looking for people who are well, there's a range of things they'll look at, but SIM blast is one of the things. Those mass phishing messages that you'll get across your phones, the people responsible for that kind of thing will be one of the targets they'll go for. And there's lots of successful operations that they're involved in, which uses that joint partnership work, that intelligence sharing, to focus in on those harmful offenders.
Thank you. And just finally, Will, we heard earlier that legislation is often playing catch-up with the technology. So how does the Met Cybercrime Unit stay up to date with the latest AI tools being used by perpetrators?
Sorry, it's not all just around legislation. Of course, I totally agree. You know, legislation is always playing a catch-up game, and there's always going to be an asymmetry between how quickly the threat actors move and how quickly we can keep up from a legislative perspective. But our response is really holistic to what we do. So we have a 4P response. So there's a really big element of pursue, so going after threat actors and trying to disrupt, arrest, whatever it might be to stop them doing it, whilst also large-scale protect campaigns, preparedness campaigns and prevent campaigns around people that may be going down the pathway into fraud and cyber offending. Not all of that is leveraging particular legislative tools and means. So yeah, it's always going to be a challenge. I think understanding the problem and keeping our pulse on the problem is really important, and we do that through a range of means, including our colleagues at the City of London Police, but including really regular engagement with colleagues from private sector, colleagues from academia and elsewhere, alongside the information and knowledge that we're picking up from our investigative efforts within Metropolitan Police to try to, frankly, continue to evolve our response as the threat is changing. We absolutely recognise we have to change with that. And I think we're doing that quite effectively.
Thank you. Roy?
I think there is a missed opportunity here too. If you think about the intelligence and the data that we can get from victims and how they experience these crimes, you know, what happened, what tradecraft did the perpetrator walk them through to get them to that point. There is a lot of valuable investigation that, if we investigated these crimes, could then go into these pots of intelligence and collaboration that could be used to prevent or protect. But if we no further action 87% of cases immediately and end up with 98%, then we don't get that information and data on the live, real threat right now. So if we can look at how we support victims early, how we investigate and gather that intelligence and get a good outcome for those victims so they can not be repeat victimised, so the impact is lessened, the victim wins and we get more intelligence to take down these criminal gangs and deal with these threats.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I just maybe start with Will. Well, there's a lot of talk about AI and its sort of offensive use, so enabling scale, being more convincing. Is there anybody developing tools in a defensive sense to help people spot AI, to help you in your job see trends coming? Are those tools available?
Yeah, absolutely. Across the private sector, there's a range of AI tools that are available. For example, offerings from cybersecurity companies that can utilise AI to make the defence of computer networks that can, for either businesses or individuals, more effective than they currently are. And yeah, we are harnessing technology within the Met, and certainly colleagues in the City of London Police around the new report fraud system are harnessing technology as much as possible to try to use it back in the same way that it's been used to kind of like victimise Londoners. So, it's a pivotal part of what we need to do, because as the threat is changing and as the threat is scaling, we have to scale and change our response accordingly. So technology is going to be an enormous part of that, an enormous enabler for us in law enforcement. Because, the volume and the scale of this offending is really, really significant, and the resource that we have from a human perspective is really small. So we have to utilise technology in the fight against this, and work really closely with public-private sector partners too.
And my final question would be, is there a group of people, a think tank, one of the big IP providers, is somebody, harnessing this, leading this, trying to actively develop things? And I want to be clear, for law enforcement, because I understand they have a commercial imperative that says they'll defend their own system. But is there anybody saying tools that we have could be used for law enforcement and bringing that to the attention of law enforcement?
Yeah, so probably worth Ollie Olara expanding a little bit further on the O3C concept that was just announced in the fraud strategy that just I think came out yesterday or the day before, where that's a bespoke law enforcement, a key element of it, public-private partnership, where we can come together as law enforcement with our colleagues from across the public sector system and the wider private sector system, and technology exchange and leveraging new tools and new ways of thinking about this problem. So how do we protect potential victims at scale? How do we improve the victim response? How do we understand these threat actors and the points where we can most strategically disrupt their business models to have greatest effect for Londoners? That's all going to be a really key part of what is coming together at the O3C concept. And actually is lots of what we've been doing previously, but it's bringing that and brigading all of that resource together, I think, for the first time in a really powerful way.
Thanks, Paul. So I think there's a few bits to the answer. So in the Home Office, there's the Accelerated Capabilities Department. So we've been working hand in hand with them to talk about some of the challenges we have and some of the tools we can use to combat courier fraud specifically. So that's often people who will swap and change SIMs into different devices to make calls to people and will be highly mobile to frustrate our efforts to zero in on them from the victim. But in terms of forward-leaning technology for the police, then the Home Office are leading that as a sort of tactical thing. The technology challenge for us, there's a lot of work across government led by Jonathan Fisher, KC, to look at the disclosure challenge for us. So all of us have got devices with huge amounts of information within them. When we go and arrest someone, a lot of the evidence is across their multiple phones, SIM cards, their laptops, their iPads, whatever. We need to be able to parse all of that information and satisfy any kind of criminal trial that we've been exhaustive in going through those devices and finding everything that supports the prosecution or supports the defence. And so that as a manual exercise with the terabytes of information is unsustainable. So technology is being used to support us in doing that quicker, so we can have quicker, more effective trials, bring people to justice more quickly. So that's just one other technology aspect to this. And I think AI is, and scalability and flexibility is designed into the new report fraud service for victims, so that we're not at a point a year from now that the world's changed in offending and our system is, steam powered. So there's those elements to it. The online crime centre, the concept, and I think we have a lot of connectivity with law enforcement around the world. If you look at America, they've got a mass incarceration kind of approach, which we are not going to get to in this country. But their fraud losses are not that dissimilar from us. So you have to ask yourself the question, is massively scaling up the number of people we arrest and prosecute going to lead to that better place of less victimisation? And I think that is a legitimate question to ask ourselves. I think what the Online Crime Centre is trying to do is to bring together all of that intelligence information, the signals which happen at huge scale across the telcos, the banks and other partners, put that into one centre and try and disrupt at scale before people get victimised. So that's the concept that the government has got. The flagship part of the fraud strategy launched on Monday. It's not saying we're not going to arrest people, so it's a clear strategy with the language has shifted, but we are going to lock up more of the right people, strategically do that. We're going to try and disrupt at scale all of those criminal attacks. But a key part is empowering the public, making sure everyone recognises this thing for what it is, and we're able to really rapidly turn our insight into messages to vulnerable groups and say, this is what it looks like, this is how you protect yourself. Because it's kind of a Darwinian environment for the threat actors. If they don't make money out of it, then they're going to have to adapt really quickly. So I see this as a kind of a speeding up of that attack and response. There's the obligation on us collectively.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. It's very useful information you've been giving us. This takes into account a lot of the things which have already been raised, whether it's impersonation, deep fakes, Bitcoin. We've had it all this morning. We've seen over the last few weeks, well, the last week or so, that there have been, prominent national politicians have been starting to promote Bitcoin within the UK. Former Chancellor of the Exchequer and a party leader is involved in one particular business, let's say. My concern is that if we've seen Martin Lewis have a deep fake about his particular endorsement of a criminal activity, nothing which was to do with him, and given that there are plenty of source material for Kwasi Kwarteng and Nigel Farage to be able to create an equally convincing deep fake, do you think it's time that we should be looking at legislation to prevent politicians in particular, but celebrities in general, from, promoting things like Bitcoin and what have you, which is still very much an emerging market and is easily identifiable for fraudulent activity amongst people who may be more suggestible to messages from people like Mr. Farage or Mr. Kwarteng?
So I think cryptocurrency is a legitimate way by which people can utilise that technology for a whole different host of reasons. And just like cash and just like the banking sector, it's abused by criminals as part of their criminal schemes in a range of different ways. So, I don't think for me to comment on whether there's a legislative option or whether that promotion is involved in criminal activity or promoting criminal activity or not. But yeah, I think all of these ways by which people are going to be able to move value and ultimately monetize victims criminals are always going to find new, innovative, different ways to abuse those platforms, whatever they may be, whether it be cash, the banking sector, whether it be cryptocurrency, to realise their ill-gotten gains. So, cryptocurrency is involved in lots of investment scams, but gold is still used in lots of courier fraud scams. That just goes to show, I think, kind of like the diversity and the breadth of kind of like the offending and the different methods and ways by which criminals will use them.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Rory.
So I think what we have to think about is where these impersonation adverts, pieces of content are delivered to the end user. And I think that one of the big challenges we see are these fake adverts on social media platforms, on internet platforms. A lot of these scams are carried out in comments underneath posts on social media platforms. So to kind of answer your question in a different way, why do we allow these fake adverts, these fake comments, these impersonation pieces of content that lead to these scams to be posted on these platforms and remain on these platforms for a period of time? And it kind of also comes back to the AI impersonation piece of how do we know who anyone is if you can impersonate someone really realistically? We are going to have to work on ways to verify, are these adverts real? Are these comments real? Are the people behind these profiles real? And if they're causing harm and someone reports harm, we need to take action extremely quickly to stop another 10,000 people coming to harm tomorrow.
Well, quite. I mean, that's the point which I didn't quite touch on in my question, which was this idea that you have algorithms which will direct content into people's feeds, into people's social media accounts. And if people have a content, an algorithm profile which is going to seem attractive to messages from particular politicians, for example, then it will be very easy for scammers to direct their fraudulent activity to those with what is considered by some to be an acceptable face. And that's where my concern arises, is that you can find people could be quite easy. I mean, let's face it, they've been duped many, many times before by some of these people, and they could quite easily be duped again because they think it's an acceptable message.
Yeah, and these criminal groups, you can create a company at Companies House tomorrow for £30. You can go to a social media platform and buy advertising profile data and understand who might be really interested in your advert, what verification is being done that that's a real company, it's legitimate, that advert is real. And that is what is causing lots of harm because of the one-to-many nature of those comments. So I think that we really need to get control of who these people are online on these platforms, connecting with the general public and what they are able to do. And most importantly, when someone reports to a platform that they have been scammed based on a comment or a post or an advert, the time that those things remain online leads to huge amounts of harm. So how do we quicken that process and protect people?
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to our next section, which is about policing online fraud in London. Assembly Member Best.
Thanks. Good morning, Rory. You mentioned already today that you think only a third of those cases of fraud are being reported to the Met. What do you think the main challenges are when it comes to reporting and recording fraud?
So I think there's a range of factors here, and we've touched on some of them already, in that it's actually quite difficult for a member of the general public to work out, is there a crime? What is a cybercrime? What is an online fraud? You know, so what is the threshold where I would actually report that to the police? I think there is a user engagement issue. I think for a lot of people, they have reported in the past and they've received a no further action. They haven't had any engagement. They think, what's the point? You know, I'm not going to get any help. I think if you're a 14-year-old boy who's been involved in a sextortion scam, are you going to phone the police and ask for help? Probably not. That's quite a scary route to walk to try and recover. And the onus is kind of on you to understand what's happened and try and explain. And that for many, many people is really confusing. For a lot of people who come to us, they are in crisis, they're in panic, they need someone to guide them through that process and help them understand what's happened. And ultimately what victims want and what is in the victim's code is a victim has the right to be understood. But if you are reporting to someone who isn't a cybersecurity expert, who doesn't understand technology, they probably don't understand what it is you're explaining or what the right advice is for you to take to contain it. Because sometimes the obvious advice, for example, with sextortion or cyberstalking is just change your password, block that account. But that can often lead to escalating harm. You know, that's not a considered way to respond. And so it's making sure that they can actually speak to someone who gives that help. And there are also just parts of the community who won't engage with the police, don't have that level of trust in the police. And so the police isn't always the right front door to report these crimes. They need somewhere where they can get help and be encouraged. And if we look at the London pilot, at the point of entry into our London pilot, we had, I think 36% of people had reported to the police. On exit from our service, it was 79%. So we were able to give confidence to those individuals of, yes, this is a crime, yes, you should report, and yes, this is what will happen when you do report. So that middle step adds a lot of value in how people understand what their options are.
Thanks. And you touched on this earlier about the amount of people that will get a no further action decision. I think that the last figure I heard was that's 98% of cases they'll get no further action. So in your experience as well, is that something that you've helped overcome with those cases where you see no further action? Is there a middle step here where we can actually help the police to reopen those cases and get some action?
Yeah, there absolutely is. And if you think about, again, coming back to the pilot of increasing the number of people report, one of the big challenges that report fraud and City of London police have is the quality of the report itself. And I know the new system has gone a long way to improve that. And what we're hearing is that experience is really good and it's much better. But being able to sit alongside a victim in that early stage and help them understand what's happened, investigate what has actually happened, build that evidence, and understand what is intelligence that might be useful to go and take down a criminal gang, what is evidence of the crime, and make sure that that is in the report, that goes quite a long way when the initial filtering review of those cases is done of what likelihood is there here that we can lead to someone being charged or summoned. Because for most cases, the quality of those reports. So if we can engage really early with people who understand these crimes in detail, and we can improve the quality of these reports, we should have a higher chance that an investigation will take place for those victims.
Thanks. And another thing, I'll come to you in second, Ruth, with lots of questions that way. Rory, just to pick up again on the point you were touching on around victims reporting to police, a lot of these cases can come from sextortion or through being a scam via like a porn website or maybe a honey trap for an extramarital affair. These are lots of reasons why people may not want to go public, right? So having that step for an organisation like yourself, does that reassure people that where they can kind of be confident in the privacy of their case going to the police where it needs to?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these crimes, it's not someone's logged into my bank account and stolen £100. There is a campaign that has led to that financial loss and that impact. And that can be the sharing of sexual images. It can be feel like you're in a relationship. People can be really embarrassed. They can be really ashamed. They can be really worried about having to go and talk about these issues. And also, it may be a parent coming to talk about a child and they're worried about the child getting in trouble. It may be that the victim has been tricked into being a money mule and they have moved money for the criminal as part of the catfishing, so they're also worried about getting in trouble. So having that safe place to come where they know they will get immediate expert help but can be guided through a safe way to engage with the police, provide that report. In my experience in operating across London for 18 months doing exactly that, more people will eventually report, the quality will be better. And for those people who don't want to report, they will get better outcomes.
When you did that initial pilot, both yourselves at the Cyber Helpline and MOPAC reported that you had bridged an important gap that was missing in reporting cyber fraud and dealing with those cases. And obviously, in the 25-26 settlement, that's when the government cut the victim support by 4.2%, leading to funding being cut for the programme here in London. But recently the Assembly passed a motion to reinstate that funding, which is £170,000, so it's pretty good value in terms of a service. What would the effect of that money being put back into the Cyber Helpline service be for Londoners?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. We can harness the cybersecurity community. Our charity is about taking the cybersecurity community, cyber experts, and utilising them as volunteers to provide that support to victims of these crimes. If you look at that London pilot, our cost per case was £101. It's a really cost-effective service for us to deliver. That money enabled us to hire 20 volunteers, staff, and run a scaled service for London that meant more Londoners could use our service. It meant more people had better outcomes, more people reported to the police with higher quality police reports. But one really important thing to understand is that the service was also used by a lot of police officers across London, because most police officers aren't technical, they're not cybersecurity experts. One minute they're dealing with a stolen car, next minute they're talking to someone about a complex cybercrime. A lot of officers would come to us and ask for, this is what I'm being told, what do you think's happening here, where might the evidence be? So not only is it a service to Londoners, it's also a service to people in this space who want to understand the right advice to give and how to proceed with those. It had a huge impact.
Thanks, Rory. And Ruth, if I could turn to you, obviously, to go back to the top and come back to what are the main challenges when it comes to reporting and recording these crimes. I also wondered if you could touch on the fact the Police Federation has highlighted there's 48 separate categories, and I wonder if much to what we've discussed earlier, does that make things muddy the waters a little bit for those reporting and recording crime, or is that the right amount of right amount of categories?
So I would say that, upon with the categories as well, there's that many frauds can span several categories. So it might start as a romance fraud, and then it moves into this horrible term pig butchering, where basically the victim is fattened up, and then it turns into a crypto scam or other sorts of scams. So the categories are too specific and also not specific enough. And can I also refer to the language on this? Pig butchering is an awful phrase. A lot of the language is demeaning to victims. Like you talk about falling victim of fraud. You wouldn't talk about falling victim to a burglary or to domestic abuse. So a lot of the language in society, we still blame victims. Victims are seen as bringing this on themselves still. And it's reflected in reporting. People are ashamed of reporting. They blame themselves for what happened. They internalise that external societal attitudes. And that leads to them either not reporting, or if they do report, they won't necessarily tell their families. And it's not just for the romance frauds or other frauds like that. So I've got a quote here from a victim of a technical support fraud, where basically some posting people from Amazon had said that, your account's compromised, you've got to move this money this way. And she was a respected member of society. She was treasurer of several charities. It wasn't just her money that was lost. It was charity money. She got it all back eventually, but that didn't stop the health impact on her. And she said, and in a way, I knew what I was doing. Do you understand? I was complicit. When they said to do this, I did it. I was so obedient. That's what I hate. I am really, really ashamed. And it was that sense of her being complicit. As a fraud, you've got to be an active part of the script. This thing, social engineering, you do it with the fraudster. And I think that's what the language needs to change. Until that language changes, until it's seen as a public health thing, I think we'll keep fighting this losing battle, and people won't report. And if they do report, they won't necessarily tell the full story.
Yeah, absolutely. And to what degree do you think reporting is there a barrier of fear of retribution, or because there's these two things, right, that happen with the scammers? Is obviously a lot of victims, on the one hand, they'll say they feel so stupid, it was their fault, etc. But on the other hand, some victims just feel that fear and there's threats of violence. So is that something we haven't touched on? Is that also a barrier, or is that less so than the shame element?
I think it is a barrier as well, especially for sextortion cases. You've got the basic threat that young boy says that, sees that, not only do we know what you're doing, we all know if you tell someone, and if we tell someone, then we'll tell everyone. So an adult might know that's an empty threat, but the child doesn't. And that's when the self-harm and suicides can creep in, because people just feel so alone and they feel that there's no one there to help them. And part of the social engineering is making them feel that they're alone. And an issue we've come across also with romance fraud is especially that people don't necessarily realise they're victims. So people's families often will say, you're being defrauded, you're being targeted, this person isn't real, this person is scamming you. But the victim has invested so much time and energy and so much love into that person that they don't want to believe, because then they have to face not only that they've lost maybe their life savings, but also they've lost their self-esteem and everything else. So that's a really hard thing to overcome. And that's why proper support is needed, and not only at the point of reporting, but also throughout the process. And it should be an open and fluid thing that you can dip in and out of, and it should be tailored to the victim and their needs. So it might be that a phone call, one and done, but some of our victims needed in-person long-term supports over maybe several years for them to not only realise they had been a victim, to come to terms with it, to get their money back, but also build up themselves and their self-esteem to have any hope, chance of moving on. And often people don't move on. They can be targeted again, or they can take their own lives. And so support needs to recognise that as well. And we need we don't need minimum service standards, although that's nice to have, but we need something that recognises each individual victim as different. Each story is different. And while there are crime scripts, while there are similarities, there's also that individual victim experience.
Yeah, thanks. I'd probably argue that the minimum service isn't even being administered for victims now. But Ruth, finally, is something like the cyber helpline needed in this space to bridge that gap, do you think, or is that something just the Met can do on their own?
Definitely there should be a partnership work. The cyber helplines work is essential, but it's only part of the response picture. It should be GPs, it should be social services, it should be public health organisations, it should be the private sector, it should be a whole joint effort. And we found in our research, it's Surrey and Sussex, not London, but it's not too far away. And basically there isn't that joined up working, there isn't that recognition of need, and especially with health services don't realise their part to play in it as well, because lots of victims do go to the GPs saying that with their health impacts, and they wouldn't necessarily know that this was caused by the fraud they were going through, and neither would the GP wouldn't know what questions to ask. So a victim is left maybe had one case of someone had a cancer diagnosis that they think was because of the fraud. Others reporting high blood pressure, sleeplessness, and these are all seen as mental health issues, not because of the fraud.
Thanks, Ruth. And Lara and Oliver, if I could turn to you quickly, we've briefly touched on the categories there. Do you think the categories are in the right place, or is it confusing things? Do they need to be altered?
So I think we are aware that the language we use in this industry can be a little bit overly complex sometimes. So we have had 60 categories of fraud and cybercrime for quite a long time. There is a process with the Home Office to reduce that down to the more alignment with the underlying legislation, which will help us, as you know, because the fraud and cyber threat will change. So we can create more tags so that we can record it in a more straightforward manner, but still have the insight and understanding so that we know that where criminals are pivoting to. I suppose the other things I would point out, the pig butchering term is a literal translation from overseas. It's not something we've chosen, and we completely accept what Ruth's saying, that completely agree that the language that we use is to be really considered, because judgment and shame are barriers to reporting and stop people from recovering from what's happened to them. And whilst I think there's probably more likelihood of those severe impacts on victims coming from those concerted investments by the fraudster in their victim to really keep them under the spell, there's no point really automatically assuming that because of, I think Will said it earlier, because of the category or the level of loss, the harm will be equivalent. It doesn't always work like that, so we really try and emphasise not to draw assumptions. There's some really good partnership working across Surrey and Sussex under Operation Signature to respond to victims of fraud. But I think Lara's probably in a better position to talk about the way that the system that we've delivered is there to kind of deliver different layers of service to victims depending on the assessment of needs, and to put that into the right place where it can.
Thanks, Ollie. I think I fully agree with what Ruth and Rory were saying. I think the language in the past has been really crude. They used to say, fraud is victimless, and it couldn't be further from the truth. It's so personal and it's so impactive, and that's where we can get smart in getting proactive. And it all comes down to the education, 100%. In regards to the consistent messaging, so working with the Stop Think Fraud campaign, there's lots of good work happening, but it's still very siloed. So I think that's super, super important. And the working together and the changes of the language that we're using so people aren't embarrassed. I think the education has to start right at the early stages when children start going to school, so they understand that this is that growing criminality, not to be afraid of it, but to give them, to empower them to understand what's out there, how they can protect themselves, their friends, their family. I think that's super important.
Thanks. Just, Laura, Oliver, really quickly, if you can, because we've talked a lot about how we could improve victim services, which obviously needs money, could you just tell me to what degree we're using the asset recovery incentivisation scheme within both the COL and Met? Obviously, there was £5.5 billion of cryptocurrency taken last year. To what extent are we able to reclaim that money?
So, I mean, right at the point of report, we work really closely with retail banking to make sure that if someone says, I've sent the money into that account, we give that receiving bank that intelligence straight away so they can send it back. So we really try and look to mitigate the loss straight away. I think there's been... there hasn't been a huge amount of investment, but there has been government investment in proactive resources across every region. And the investment in money laundering and asset recovery has been at a higher level, I think, and across every region. But I think probably Will is better placed to talk about the operational use of that funding, because there's been growth and there's been collaboration across our organisations.
I don't want to take up too much time, but if there's some figures that you could send across to perhaps comparisons to other regions, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm happy to send Slow Time a breakdown of kind of different types of ARIS recovery and then what we're spending the money on within the Met.
Thank you. Members and panel, if we could pick up the pace a little, please. So, Assembly Member Small-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Well, what are the main functions of the Met Cybercrime Unit?
So, within the Metropolitan Police, part of it called Specialist Crime. The two commands that I lead within Specialist Crime are economic crime, and the primary threats that we deal with there are fraud and illicit finance, or money laundering, as it's often more commonly known. And then there's the Cyber Command, where there's the Met Cybercrime Unit. So that's roughly how the structure breaks down. So our cyber and our fraud teams work really closely together. What's the difference between a low sophistication cybercrime and a high technical sophistication fraud? There's a blurred line there. So they work really, really closely together. But we're primarily responsible for delivering the Metropolitan Police's response to the fraud threat within London.
Thank you. And how do the Met and City of London Police work together to tackle online fraud in London? I mean, who kind of has responsibility and jurisdiction for what, and how do you decide who takes on something?
Yeah, so obviously, as the Met, we're responsible for policing Greater London. Ollie and Lara will be able to talk about where the city kind of like fit in the system. We have a really close collaborative relationship that we've actually just been working on over the past year to bring even closer together. So for many, many years now, we've worked as a unit called the DCPCU, the Dedicated Card Payment Check and Credit Card Payment Fraud team.
I thought we were bad for acronyms.
Yeah. So that's a collaborative team, but investigators from both the City of London Police and the Metropolitan Police working hand in glove together day in and day out, tackling specific fraud types. And we have just launched at the start of this year a proactive economic crime team, really focused in on the threat within London, where we are proactively going after the most significant economic crime threats, primarily our priority 6 fraud areas within London. So we've just stood up that partnership, but we obviously work really, really closely with colleagues from the City of London Police, but also colleagues from the National Crime Agency and elsewhere across the whole law enforcement and public sector system and private sector partners in kind of like making the response as impactful as it can be.
Because just to confirm, I'm right in thinking that the City of London have the national lead on fraud issues?
Yes, so we're the National Lead Force for Economic Crime, so we have the portfolio for cybercrime, anti-money laundering and asset recovery, and for fraud. We have a local territorial fraud team. We have that pan-London proactive economic crime team. Our cybercrime team works hand in glove with the Met cybercrime team to support each other and break down the work. And we also have what we call National Lead Force Operations. It was the fraud squad 15 years ago. So we have that cadre of detectives who are there to support other forces where they have complex cases and also provide a reactive investigation capability for the most complex cases up and down the country with high numbers of victims. So kind of 200 victim investment fraud that would potentially come into that team there. So a range of things, but leading and coordinating the national response, providing capability and tools, coordinating tactically for operations which span across the country, and trying to be a voice to government on what the law enforcement experience and needs are, and two-way communication. pressure
Thank you
of time.
both very much. Yeah, that's really helpful just in terms of understanding how you interact with each other. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you. This one's to the Met. What progress have you been able to make under the new Met for London plan to strengthen the Met's response to online fraud?
Yeah, so in the new Met for London 2 plan that's just been published, we've explicitly called out what we're going to do relating to both economic and cybercrime within that. So we want to more proactively work together through teams like the Proactive Economic Crime Team to go after the threat. And we want to do that in a campaign plan style manner. So the 6 priority fraud threats that we've spoken about a number of times, we're going to run concerted intensifications of activity that involve not just arrests and criminal justice outcomes, but communication plans, protect messaging, prevent advice to people that may be falling into criminal pathways against our 6 priority fraud types over the course of the next 18 months. And that will be working with collaboratively with the public and private sector across London. And we think that that's the way that we are going to be most impactful for Londoners in terms of going after and tackling those 6 priority fraud threats. And so an example is Operation Callback, which is an intensification against courier fraud. So that was, we've run 2 now intensification pieces of activity where we've cut offending of courier fraud by in half in the London area, decreased victim losses by 2/3, whilst arresting on callback to nearly 40 people and seizing around £500,000 in cash. And the protect messaging that we've been able to put out to people through various different channels, through, again, working closely with the city, has been really powerful in reaching people and educating them around that threat and providing them advice and support and guidance on how they can best protect themselves from it. So that's an example of how we're really evolving our response so that we can be as impactful as we can with the resources that we have available.
Thank you. And do you believe that the Met has the right number of officers, staff and resources in its online fraud investigations teams?
So within the Met, we have a large command. So we have around 100 people working in the cybercrime unit, and we have around 300 people working in economic crime. So there's a significant number of both officers and staff who work day in and day out. We have evolved our response to be as effective as we can be, but we've heard a lot around the scale. Today, there is a lot of fraud and cybercrime going on, a lot of fraud and cyber that's impacting Londoners. We are really focused on being as impactful as we can with the resource that we have available. And we are constantly thinking of new ways where we can deliver more with what we've got. So, we are not able to arrest our way out of this problem, for example, and we can harness new technologies to do better for Londoners.
Thank you. And has that staffing level increased or decreased since the unit was established?
So within economic crime, we've actually had an uplift in staff that we've actually funded through ARIS, which is the Asset Recovery Incentivisation Scheme, which came a little bit earlier, where we were able to bring in 70 additional people trained in financial investigation into the Met. So economic crime in particular is one of the areas of the Met that we have been investing in, and that from a headcount perspective, over the coming kind of like 12 to 18 months will be increasing.
Okay, and that was the economic side, and the 100 staff on the other side?
Within the cybercrime unit, the staffing levels there are about static as they have been over the last couple of years. There's lots of external funding that we're able to utilise from Home Office and other bits of government that we use in the cybercrime unit in particular.
So far you've been able to dodge the tough choices regime which we've seen affecting other. I say dodge. I don't mean to say dodge.
There's tough choices across the Met. It's a challenging financial position, but from a resourcing perspective, we are doing the best with the resources that we have available, given the scale of the threat that we're facing.
Okay, and given the fact that we've been told that we're going to be looking at about £250 million worth of savings over the next 2 years, would you expect there to be cuts to your units?
Yeah, I'm not aware that choices have been made as to kind of like how the Met's going to manage that, but I'll engage as will other leaders in the Met to kind of like do that in the way that is least impactful in our ability to deliver a response for Londoners against the fraud and cyber mission.
Thank you. And this one could apply to both the City and the Met Police, which is what are the key challenges in recruiting and retaining specialist cybercrime police officers and staff?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've spoken a lot about engagement with the private sector and the ability to, our need to be able to engage and work alongside them. But cyber and economic crime in particular, where in law enforcement you're going to generate skills that are really attractive and can command big salaries out there. So we've done lots of work in thinking of different innovative ways to kind of like push people through the training pathways for financial investigation quicker. Improve the offer for our staff so that we can retain people as best as possible. But it's a challenge. It's always a challenge. But I think one of the beauties of the kind of work that you can come to the Met or you can come to the City and you can do really unique, genuinely impactful work and develop your skills in a way that I don't think you can do elsewhere. And that's always going to be an amazing part of the offer of coming in and working day in, day out to protect Londoners.
Thank you.
The flip side maybe is that while we do have people go to the private sector, we've then got a good contact in that private sector organisation. So we've seen some people go be crypto investigators, go into crypto exchanges. We've got a friendly face on the other side when we need to act quickly and coordinate. My career pathway, in no means an economic crime specialist, but a generalist, go through probation for 2 years and work through various different teams and get to this point where in a really exciting area of work. What we've done is we've created a program called Police Now, where people can come directly into economic crime. So we don't need them to go and demonstrate their ability to work on domestic violence or burglary or other kind of crime types. If they've got the skills and the appetite to really come into this area, which is much more of a kind of an industry than it was when I was leaving school, then they can come more quickly into that. So we're able to more quickly access people. And the evidence is that we can get people from a broader range of backgrounds through that approach. So that's a really exciting opportunity for policing nationally.
Okay, thank you. One of the problems that we find, particularly for beat police, for want of a better term, is the affordability of living in London, the being able to actually get onto the patch in order to do the work. Are there opportunities for people who may not necessarily be London residents to join your teams? They could be based in Hartlepool for if they're dealing largely in an online sphere. Is that something which is being considered, sort of removal of units beyond the London boundary?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So we're actually just working on a review at the moment of kind of like looking at our attrition rates across the economic and cyber commands and looking at ways by which we may be able to adjust our offer or tweak our terms and things like that to, so that we can retain the kind of like skills that we need to deliver our mission as best as possible. So that work is ongoing. No, having people that work kind of like, out of commuting distance reach from Met offices is not something that we've been considering, and I'm not sure that I don't know, but I'm not sure that will be one of the options that ultimately we'll look at.
Okay, thank you. Anything from the City? Is that an issue? That's something you may be looking at?
I think it's pretty similar, really. We have to be in a position to surge resource, and if we have lots of through lockdown things have changed in working habits, but fundamentally that I imagine is the biggest barrier. For us as an organisation, we have lots of staff working across the country, but
Thank you. The final question is, in order to, what are you able to do to attract the best talent, particularly the IT literate talent, who may find that there are far more lucrative opportunities in the private sector, for example? How are you able to approach that?
So we've got a range of tools in our kind of like attraction strategy. So we offer internships, we offer industry, we offer placements in industry for students that are in studying, for example, computer science and things like that that are really relevant to us. And we offer a comprehensive training package for people that may come later in their careers as police officers to kind of like develop their skill set. And lots of that training is jointly developed with colleagues from the City of London Police and the National Crime Agency. So we need those technical skills to deliver our mission. They're massively important, and we have a range of different ways we can both bring those in, existing skills, and kind of like train up our own people to deliver them too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. I'm not sure who to aim this at, maybe starting with Will, but obviously Casey exposed that some specialist teams have had bad misconduct. So I just wondered how you're preventing that in the fraud team, especially when there's access to tools, tech, insight in this space, and just making sure that's not being misused.
Yeah, so I think it's a good question. So we have recently been developing our kind of like strategies around this, and a comprehensive people strategy alongside lots of work that's gone on from a culture review and work that we're doing as a business group, as specialist crime, of which cybercrime and economic crime command sit in that. So yeah, I think we've come a long way in addressing lots of those issues. It's not to say nothing like that could ever happen again or doesn't exist there. But yeah, from myself as a leadership perspective, yeah, we've put a lot of time and effort and a lot of focus in on culture within the commands. And yeah, I don't think that there's the kind of like abuse of tools and systems in economic and cyber to an extent any more than you could abuse systems elsewhere within the Met. So I'm not sure there's a particular reason as to why there would be a particular issue in economic crime as opposed to potentially elsewhere.
I guess it's just the fact that there's the gain, isn't there? I guess would be a motivating factor for people who are, do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's, yeah, an interesting space that, but so has this been an issue in the past, or is it something that how do you continue to just make sure this isn't happening?
Yeah, it's kind of work that will never be done in many ways, right? So it's a really ongoing process. So there's surveying of staff. There's our business-wide people strategy plans that includes significant elements around culture. We have our own culture lead within economic crime in particular, who's just published a plan and has focus and engagement groups that go across the entire command, across all of our locations, across all of our sites. And we combine that work at a local level with a business group level with the work that we're doing Met-wide to ensure that we really keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening, and so that we can address issues as effectively and as early as they might arise.
So it's the more kind of general culture change stuff that came from Casey rather than anything specific to this kind of section?
Yeah, obviously our plans are specific and bespoke to our command, but yeah, broadly they're aligned to what we're doing more broadly from an organisational perspective, yes.
Right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We do have a couple more questions on this section, but we've been going for over an hour and a half, so I'm going to call a break. If everybody could be back, well, not much of one, unfortunately, but if everyone could be back here by what is that, 34 within 6 minutes? That's okay. Thank you. About to start. Okay, so continuing, Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Online fraud is a complex area of crime and there are multiple agencies who have a role in tackling it across London. What can be done to simplify the landscape and help Londoners understand the process? And that's making an assumption that simplifying the landscape is what's needed. It may not be. But what can be done in this area? If I start with Will, because I can't read anybody else's from this far away.
So I think we have simplified the landscape, and I think report fraud as a replacement for action fraud will be a great leap forward, a great step forward in terms of improving the victim experience and making that process clearer and simpler. The response to fraud in London sits across multiple different organisations and agencies. So you have the Metropolitan Police, you have colleagues from the City of London Police, you have the National Crime Agency, and there's the National Economic Crime Command that sits as part of the National Crime Agency. There's a whole host of other organisations that work in this space, but we work really collaboratively with all of them. So that collaboration, I think, irons out kind of like siloed working or a lack of join up as much as possible. So yeah, I think we are making progress in terms of joining up the response as best as possible, and I think. The National Police Service, which has just relatively recently been announced in a government white paper, may also look at ways by which the response to fraud and cyber may be evolved moving forward in the future.
Okay, thank you. Rory, I'll come to you on the same question.
I think it is confusing for people. I think that action fraud, now report fraud, is that central reporting place. But if we think about the different types of online fraud, we think about the different types of online harms. They're not all fraud, and the name is tricky. I think that the advice for some of these issues is to go to your local police station. If you're a different age, it's to go to CEOP. Often you're signposted out to different charities. I think as a charity trying to navigate this space, who has responsibility? You've got the National Cyber Security Centre, you've got the Home Office, you've got DCIT. There's lots of people with an interest in this space. I think that we need to look at, one, more of a focus on individuals and how we support individuals, because a lot of that focus is on business. And for example, with report fraud, you can phone up and get help if you're a charity or a business, but as an individual, you can only report into that service. So different service levels depending on the type of victim you are. So I think there's a long way to go on that experience of reporting and all these people thinking about cyber and the response in these different organisations, how they pull together and how we have a joined up system for victims.
But as Londoners, we're lucky because we have your organisation, which is just about managed to hold on. Would a national version of you be useful?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about the charity, the Cyber Helpline, we offer a kind of skeleton service nationally. So we have 3,000 people coming to us every month. We're 150 volunteers. The demand is huge, both for volunteers to come on and more people need our help. The London pilot was about trying to scale our resource to a level where we could actually meet the demand in London. Obviously, that funding was removed, so we're back to that kind of skeleton model. But I think that's a well-trodden path in every other crime area. If you look at the charity sector, whether it's stalking, whether it's domestic abuse, whether it's knife crime, there are charities out there to work on the behalf of the victim and manage that victim experience while the police do their really valuable job of investigating the crime. So I think that absolutely, we have not caught up in victim services and technical knowledge in that space.
Okay, I think you make a strong point about it's a world travel journey to do it in that way, and I think it deals with a lot of the personal issues, the worry about police action afterwards against yourself and the shame and stigma and stuff. So I think that's something that we should develop and understand why your service is not receiving funding, and that actually we should ask for more, not just survival. I come to everybody here. Please feel free to answer anybody here. Do you support the government's proposal to move the responsibility for fraud, economic and cyber crime to the National Police Service, and why? If I start on that end, please. DS.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think looking back, there's a path of convergence here for fraud and cyber. Come back to your previous question. So I think we used to have them as very separate things. Other agencies and acronyms proliferated. We are on a path of convergence, and the National Police Service and the kind of the review of structures that will go on across the rest of this year is an ongoing process. So we'll see where that takes us. I think there's a lot of investment in report fraud, and a lot of investment in the brand of Stop Think Fraud. So those are the main public messaging systems that we need to have there. And I think behind that, kind of within the industry and sides across ourselves on the panel here, we kind of know who we are and where our roles sit. So, and I think there's maybe a distinction between the high volume fraud, which is or the individual perpetrated fraud, and the more serious organised fraud, and there's different places for that to sit. But I think from a national perspective, when we talk to people up and down the country, there's an expectation for people in Gloucestershire or Lincolnshire or wherever that they have a relationship with their local policing services, their neighbourhood policing teams. So I think that's the thing we're trying to meet, is to give all of those people the tools to be useful for their local community, where they want to have that local kind of coffee in the town hall kind of connectivity with their policing services. So and that's the challenge we're trying to meet, making it feel like it's locally tailored and supportive, but we recognise that geography is kind of not very relevant for a lot of the law enforcement response. So wherever we can do better to bring capability together to have the biggest impact, that's great. I think there's always going to be a need for people to feel like it's local and personal to them.
I do see the challenge between the resource you have and the enormous issue you have to deal with. But just to come to Ruth and Lara, is there a worry or a small chance that some of the smaller individual frauds will be overlooked when you've got this big national body? Is that something you worry about, or do you support the move as well? If I start with Lara and then come to Ruth.
I think what's really important, Lord Bailey, is that the report fraud is the main repository for all the data. That's when we can all work in collaboration to ensure that the right bits of data go to the right specific areas who are capable for serving that. I think that's absolutely crucial and critical. Yes, in regards to systems, we should be able to see across the various systems so we understand the true threat. But for me, it's about that repository of where the data comes into report fraud, so we can then share it out with the relevant agencies who can provide that extra support, as well as our complementary, our victim services within our system, that we can then provide that protect messaging right from the onset, and then that further support, if they're extra vulnerable, the safeguarding, etc., can start from there. So we have the consistent messaging, so there isn't confusion.
Okay, thank you. Ruth?
So on that, obviously the Police Foundation, we've done lots of research into the space. A strategic review of policing in England and Wales a couple of years ago. We looked at the way that the police forcing is structured and looked at the national and local systems and where responsibility should lie. And a lot of our work suggests that the response should be both national and it should be very local. And so in terms of the national picture, there should be disruption, it should be the pursuits, it should be working internationally, targeting the offenders. But the response to the victims should be local and should be personal. So we've touched on Operation Signature already, and the beauty of that was that every victim, once a report was received by the police force, and it was graded to be medium or high, they got that in-person visit from a PCSO who would sit with them in their home and would talk through the report with them. And in that moment, they'd also see, okay, is there any other issues that we don't know about? Is this person hoarding? Is this person going through maybe divorce or maybe other issue that might make them situationally vulnerable in that moment? And so it's having that personal connection. And it might be that all that person needs is that one visit, or it might be that they need ongoing longer supports. And that's why Victim Support then moved in that model and offered that ongoing longer-term supports. Or it might be that they need a phone number so that I don't need anything now, but they might need it later on as the enormity of what happens hits. And so it's having that personal, local response, which is in person, is familiar, and obviously that costs, but there's an argument that could be part of the wider neighbourhood policing picture. Frauds victims live in neighbourhoods. PCSOs, you don't have to be a trained investigator to be able to offer that personal response and to be able to listen. And being listened and being believed and understood goes a long way towards helping with some of the harm fraud causes.
Thank you. Chair?
Thank you. Assemblymember Hall.
This is so interesting. Thank you all. Chair, this is a slightly different question, forgive me, but it didn't fit in anywhere else. I talk to an awful lot of police officers, and one of the things that frustrates them beyond everything else is the fact that they go to so many lengths to get the criminals. They get the criminals, they go to court, they're either slapped on the wrist and, you know, virtually nothing happens. I know there's nothing you can do about that. But do you have many repeat offenders? Because if it's a physical person being somewhere, the police can at least, I suppose, keep an eye on them. But with fraud, they can be in a room somewhere with a computer and do it again. So, first of all, the question, I suppose, is do you see proper sentences being given to the ones that cause the real problems? And do you see many repeat offenders?
So I think it's a really good question. So I will probably just say something about the scale and then the response, because I do think it's quite important. You know, low rates of positive outcomes that are delivered, but those positive outcomes are probably skewed towards where we're delivering criminal justice outcomes in the UK. You need to be in the UK for us to deliver those criminal justice outcomes. A really significant chunk of these offenders don't reside in the UK, and criminal justice outcomes are not practical or proportionate, or ultimately going to be massively impactful for us to try to deliver. You know, if we drove up reporting, if there's over 5 million offences of cyber and fraud in the UK every year, and we drive up reporting, the Met, we currently receive 40% of demand from report fraud. We would get millions and millions of reports a year. We'd get tens of thousands a day. So the positive outcome point on just kind of like delivering, arresting people, you know, who are behind every one of these incidents, I think is going to be really challenging. There's much more we can do in terms of being sophisticated and delivering disruptions and harnessing the information we have in the report fraud system to improve our response. So it may still be an NFA, right? And you know, that's not, I totally appreciate kind of like the you know, how that can make victims feel and things like that. But we can still operationalise that response. Yeah, of course. These people are victimising people at a mass scale, and it's a really challenging. It's really challenging for us to deliver a response to that threat in a way that gets them to that they can stop doing it. There are also lots of repeat victims, sadly. So we focus lots of resource on people that might be repeat victims. So we've increased in the Met Police in the last year our safeguarding visits by 45%, where we're actually going out and engaging with victims who we understand are repeat victims. We've also done much more on our kind of like education and prepare and protect piece to go out and try to preemptively stop people who are in specific, more vulnerable groups. So we've done over 400 events attended by over 20,000 people, where the feedback is that the 98% of the people are saying they're going to change their behaviour on the back of those engagements. So that's the kind of work I think we can deliver that's really impactful. Yeah, of course there are people that are repeat offenders. You know, going through the criminal justice system and delivering outcomes against these individuals when they're operating this scale is really inefficient response. It's not to say we shouldn't do it. We absolutely should continue to do that.
So when you do it, are you let down by the courts, as indeed other departments in the Met are?
So for us in the Met, we'll try to deliver the best outcomes through working closely with colleagues in the CPS and the court system that we possibly can.
I know you do. I absolutely know you do. And that's a very good work. You should be a politician of actually not answering. But I mean, when they do, I mean, so many people are so miffed by the lack of sentencing or the or the very short amount of time, do you find that on individuals that you do actually put in the courts?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think officers often feel frustrated around some of the criminal justice outcomes they get. But I think that's where we have to be savvier in terms of thinking and delivering different ways to disrupt the threat.
Okay.
So different ways that we can protect people, different ways that we can disrupt technologically the services that we know fraudsters are using on the internet, as an example, which is operational activity we've delivered in the Met quite a bit through the takedown of iSpoof and things like that, for example, which is an online capability that we know fraudsters use. So there's different ways that we can associate cost and risk. There's different ways we can disrupt this type of criminality, alongside continuing to do the great work that we do to kind of like push offenders through the UK criminal justice system where that's possible for us.
Okay, thank you. I've seen Rory, and then
I think the reality is that if you look at the data, you are 7 times less likely to see your perpetrator charged or summoned if your crime is online compared to offline. And my experience of running this charity for 10 years, over 100,000 cases, in the online fraud space, there are very few perpetrators who will go to court. And that is largely a jurisdiction issue. There's lots of other issues there. But these crimes don't get that far.
no, and I do understand why. And the disruption model. The trouble is, and loads of us will say, we know exactly what not to do, and yet we still find ourselves suddenly thinking, blooming heck, what's happened? It happened to me, turned off the computer, and I had to go and buy another computer because I didn't dare turn it back on again. Did I report it? No. Did I think I was an absolute numpty? Yes. And there must be thousands of people like me, and I know what you shouldn't do. But, you know, in the moment when somebody's offering to help because your computer's not working, but it's crazy. Oliver, I saw you.
Yeah, frustratingly, they're very adept and skillful and manipulative people, and if they weren't, they wouldn't be successful. They'd be out of business. I just go back to the point Will made about the iSpoof service, which was, it's people expect I've reported a crime. There's going to be a traditional police investigation. They will take my evidence. They'll go and find the person and arrest them. What the Met did was something that was really innovative, was to look at the criminal service that was enabling tens of thousands of crimes, a spoofing service to conceal who you are on a phone call, and look at who ran that service and ran an operation wrapped around that, working in partnership with us, 400 people up and down the country who were using the service. But TJ Fletcher was the guy who ran the service from this part of London, and a fantastic piece of operational work, and he was sentenced to 13 years in prison. So there are really good, encouraging chunky sentences being handed out in the right places. So that's a really good way of being strategic in how we use law enforcement.
Well, that is good news, Ruth.
I think also there's something needs to be done about addressing why people go into fraud in the first place, why they think it is an acceptable career pathway. And I think a lot of the fraudsters are in West Africa, where often there aren't other options. You've got a university degree, there are no jobs. You go into this fraud as an employment, and you get money opportunities. So it's part of addressing the reasons why people do that. And I know there's a charity, Love is Blind, I've come across, that deals with romance fraud, and they did talk about actually engaging with mothers in West Africa, talking to their kids, saying, you know, fraud is not an acceptable pathway. This is the harm that you're doing. So it's looking at disrupting attitudes in lots of different ways. And I think that what comes across for research is that there's this suspects, the perpetrators, don't necessarily understand or realise or care about the impact they've had. And it's something about addressing why that is. And in terms of sentencing, it's all very well having a high sentence, but if people don't think they're going to get caught, it's the certainty of being caught that's a deterrent more than the sentence. So I think it's the two-pronged thing, both assuming people are caught and also addressing the drivers of the crime in the first place.
Yep. Okay, it's a difficult thing, and I know you are doing your level best, and it's getting worse and worse with more and more people able to use the internet and AI. I mean, people that have not been brought up with AI to assume that what they're seeing is correct. It comes as a shock to many when you realise it's complete AI. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next section, we really do need to pick up some speed here because I do want to get to the end of the question. So our next section is supporting victims of online fraud, and Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually first going to ask something similar to what Assembly Member Hall has just asked, but I don't want to dwell too much on that because you have addressed that, other than to say that it does feel quite frustrating and disappointing that without... I mean, look, we've talked quite a lot about the scale of offending and reporting and recording, and that's all really useful information, intelligence, and how that can then feed into trying to prevent other people becoming victims of this. But without a degree of enforcement and sentencing, it feels like there's basically no consequence for being a perpetrator, and that's a really, really worrying thing for me, and that worries me across all manner of crimes. But just hearing Rory, when you said that you're 7 times less likely to see a perpetrator brought to any kind of justice if something is online rather than offline, it's terrifying. So I'm not expecting a further response because I know you've already kind of discussed that, but I just wanted to say how worried that makes me feel about this. But moving on to victims and the kind of level of support and the impact that it has on that. And I can't remember who it was earlier on said that this is the most kind of common interaction that most people have with a degree of crime. And it's true. I mean, we all get the emails, the recorded phone calls that are claiming to be from Amazon or whoever, and yeah, most of the time we know what to do. We ignore it, we hang it up, we delete the email, whatever. But sometimes, obviously, they slip through the net. And a close family member of mine went through this not long ago. Now, fortunately, they had the good sense to kind of, once they realised what was going on, they then spoke to me, spoke to the rest of the family, and reported to report for action fraud as it was then, but it then kind of terrified them about future use of their computer because their computer had been taken over. Because they did stop, and then I don't think, to my knowledge, there was any financial impact, but they had their social media messaging hijacked and some really very offensive content put into places that was extremely inappropriate and unfortunate. So I'd like to understand a bit more about those other kind of impacts that this can have on people, and what we can do to make people more confident about reporting and tackling those, as well as just the purely financial element, please.
Yeah, so I really welcome we have to move on as a society, as a system, from kind of like thinking about all economic crime as a financial loss. And we have to think and recognise the kind of like the emotional harm, the psychological harm, alongside the financial harm, and the huge rate, the perspective of people being too scared to use their technology, technology in a world where, the ability to use technology is really important in people's lives, and there's a really long tail to that harm. I think, really important step for us is to recognise and prioritise according to that effectively, which is, work that we have been doing in the Met to take a much broader and multifaceted understanding of the harm of this so that we can prioritise our response to it effectively. But, yeah, I'd like colleagues who...
So on this, our research was Surrey and Sussex, but we did a survey of all victims of fraud who reported to the police within a 14-week period. And we found that 92% had some sort of mental or physical or emotional behavioural symptoms. So it's the vast majority of people who are affected in some way. And for most symptoms were stress and anxiety. But we had 63% had a change in their behaviour, and 60% had a physical health symptom. So it's not just stress and anxiety, it's other things as well. And worryingly, 1 in 5 reported their life being very affected, their daily life, and a quarter their life being moderately affected. So that's their ability to exist in their daily life, to go to work, to go to their job, to engage with their family, to go online, to leave their home. And some victims reported multiple health symptoms. I think the average was 8, but some reported a lot more. And again, we had one person, unfortunately, he reported the crime to action fraud as it was then, and then committed suicide. And that was one in a 14-week period. We don't think they filled in the survey, we don't know. But it goes to show that this is common, this happens. And I think because of the sheer scale of the impact, and it's not how lots of these people, like some were captured, were reported to us as vulnerable victims, but some weren't. The vulnerability wasn't picked on, and we have no idea that they were vulnerable, but the fact that they sort of answered, they came into our survey, and they have no contact from police, nothing. So there's so much hidden demand that, because it doesn't fit the criteria of vulnerability, is being missed. And I think this is why this is a hidden public health crisis.
I think imagine that you have been tricked into sending a criminal a sensitive image or a sensitive video. You then get a picture of all your Facebook friends, your LinkedIn page, and they say, give us £500 or we'll share this in 24 hours. You're probably worried about the money, but that's probably not your biggest concern. If you think about the mental health, the stress, the panic that you will have, if you think about your online confidence in future, and you talked about that with your family experience, that online confidence to trust people online and be online again, but also the ability to live your day-to-day life. Do you go to work the next day? Do you do the school run? Do you socialise? What if you pay that money but the video gets shared anyway? How does that impact your social life? We have thousands and thousands of people who fill in forms and surveys and talk to us about impact. Even when the financial loss is big, it is mental health, it is online confidence, and it's the ability for them to live their day-to-day life that are the big impacts in this space.
Thank you.
Just briefly add that in the fraud strategy launched on Monday, there's a task for the City London Police to work with the Home Office to deliver a victims' charter sometime in 2027. So this is a very kind of live conversation. We all recognise as professionals and the compassion, I can assure you, up and down the country, that we recognise the impact on victims and the need to do as much as we can to help them repair and rebuild their lives, and to it's been said many times, but re-emphasise, not make any kind of assumptions about impact and vulnerability based on some kind of tick box exercises. Every person is unique, and that is part of the kind of process and the value of that face-to-face contact.
And I think the other thing is just to focus on what we've all said about that challenge, the other alternative areas of outcomes. We've got to be as proactive rather than reactive. So it's the taking down of the social medias, it's taking down of the telephone numbers, those type of things. So we not only can service that one victim that of course has been targeted, but many potential future victims. That's where we've got to work really, really hard on the other outcomes that are so impactful that maybe haven't had in the past that real focus. The disruption and the stop and blocking is absolutely critical and crucial to protect the wider communities from those frauds that are already happening.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, and I do hope your family member is okay, Assemblymember Wilson. Assemblymember Garbutt.
Thank you. Just following on from this, I have a couple of questions. One is just about the role of London's Victims Commissioner, and I don't know if anyone can speak to that. I know that we've had a bit of a gap between the two Victims Commissioners, but I don't know if there's anything that Victim Commissioner has done in the past around this, or you'd want to see the Victims Commissioner doing. I don't know if anyone wants to. Rory, you look like you want to come in.
So we had a really positive relationship with the previous Victims Commissioner, Claire Waxman, who's now the National Victims Commissioner. And what we saw from her was a real understanding of particularly the online harm in the violence against women and girls space, and that the technology impact, but also that technology was that barrier to accessing justice and recovery, and that lack of expertise. So, we continue conversations with Claire, but I think there is a really important role to play there as a voice for this kind of silent, unreported majority of victims of online crime.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I've been hearing, because obviously we've worked with the Victims Commissioner before, but I haven't really heard this kind of articulated strongly. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that's just a really interesting gap about how we bring that to the fore. I mean, Will, just to follow up on some of the other bits that you were mentioning around the progress that has been made, is that around, and I suppose, Rory, you might have a comment on this as well, like around people being able to speak, you know, when they do come forward and not being kind of blamed in that frame? Like, have you done a lot of work on that training specifically so people, don't drop out once they've come forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So just within the Met, we recognise that members of the public are far more likely to bump into neighbourhood officers and potentially racists as they are the relatively small officers in specialist crime who work in economic crime. So we've done internal officer upskilling. We've embedded specific advice and support and signposts to specialist guidance in our kind of like processes and workflows from the contact centre through to the right places on our SharePoint, so officers can access materials. And we've also kind of like engaged in a number of multi-agency approaches where we're working with everyone from kind of like MOPAC to the London Fire Brigade, who do lots of work with so they do like fire assessments at care homes, and there's an opportunity there to also engage and share advice. So there's lots of initiatives like that to make sure that we are instilling the right approach and the right mentality and the right understanding into our engagement with victims of this type of criminality.
Thank you. And just briefly, Rory, is there anything else you'd want to see from the police on this?
Yeah, I think when someone reports and they talk to a police officer or someone at Report Fraud, what they really need is someone who understands the technology and how these crimes work. Because if I come to you and say, I think they've hacked my phone, I think maybe they've hacked this, you know, whenever I walk in my living room, the lamppost flickers outside, have they hacked that? That hypervigilance and concern about all technology can be really, really high with the person reporting. But if you don't have that technical understanding of what is possible technically, what is probable, how these crimes actually work, it can be really hard to give an answer, and it can be really hard for that victim to be heard and to be understood. So I do think we need to get and inject technical expertise and understanding into these early conversations as quickly as possible. And that is really, really tricky right now with the resourcing, but that is a huge gap.
Thank you. Back to you, Jan.
Thank you, Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. This is for Rory. What more do you think that the Met could do to help organisations like Cyber Helpline to engage with it?
Yeah, so I think that there are a number of ways that organisations like the Cyber Helpline can engage. That is the provision of data and intelligence that could lead support that kind of prevent and protect strategies of taking down these criminal groups. And I know that the Online Crime Centre initiative is something that will hopefully focus on that. But I think if you think about the immediate 87% of no further action cases, that is the opportunity for those to be signposted and handed over to an organisation like the Cyber Helpline. Because what we're saying at that point is, look, we don't think there's a criminal justice route here, but they've still got the problem. They're still in the middle of an online fraud or a cybercrime. A referral pathway, signposting, engaged process where those victims can then be handed over to a charity like ours who can provide that support, get a good outcome for the victim, and probably also help them make better police reports and feed into that intelligence system, would go a long way. So I think real collaboration on victim support would really go a long way. And I also think what charities like us have is a lot of data about the crimes that are not reported and the issues that are not visible in terms of impact. And so there's a lot of intelligence and information that could be shared if the right schemes were set up as well.
Do you think you'd have enough resource? Because clearly the Met deal with, and City of London deal with so many cases. Have you got the resource to actually deal with all those people if they were signposted more to you?
No, we don't. We would need funding. We've actually probably got one of the biggest cybercrime teams in the country. If you think about the 150 cybersecurity experts we have, you know, the staff that we have too, we have lots of expertise. What we don't have is enough funding to bring on enough team members to deal with that demand. And we run a waiting list right now of about 100 cybersecurity volunteers who could join our team if we had the funding to put them in place. So we're confident we can scale. If the funding is in place, the resources in place, and the mechanisms are in place for us to collaborate on victim outcomes, then we know that the impact we have is really high.
Yeah, the problem is, of course, if the police direct people to you, you don't have the money. They're directing people to an organisation that can't cope with them all. So it's a difficult situation, and I understand, but I can see why the Met might be reluctant in some ways, because if you can't cope with what they give you, that doesn't look good on the police service either. It's difficult all round, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess that's where the focus of funding from MOPAC on the pilot was. It was about scaling up that demand so we could
Yeah,
could
no,
deal
I
with.
think we all get that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Garbett.
Thank you. I know this has been spoken about quite a lot throughout the discussion around the need to kind of shift to a more kind of public health approach to kind of prevention and education. So I had a question about what's worked in this space. Like, is there any evaluation of any kind of information, campaigns, anything like that that works to kind of support and educate and inform people? And yeah, what more can be done in that space? Maybe I'll start with Ruth, yeah.
The answer is there isn't that much evaluation. We have done some scoping exercises to see what's out there, and we don't really know what works. We know what we think works, but the resources haven't been done, time hasn't been done to do the evaluation to see what's effective. And I think that's a major problem across policing in general. I think often the evaluation happens afterwards or not at all. I think that's really needs to change. In terms of, well, obviously, we have seen some initial promising work from Operation Signature that, for example, in Surrey and Sussex, that was seen as best practice. There are promising signs from the report fraud strategy. So it's just a case of, for call out to academics, to people like myself in research-led think tanks, funding is needed to do this evaluation. It's vital. So we need to work together to make sure that evaluation is properly funded, is put in place, and so initiatives are out there that we know work, rather than just doing something because we hope it might.
Yeah, and is there anything you would advise at this point that needs to be done around education and information for Londoners? Is there anything? I take the evaluation point strongly, but is there anything you would want to see or more that can be done around threats from online fraud?
I think, speaking to entirely off the top of my head, it would be a good thing to see where people get the advice, though, whether they're aware of the Stop Think Fraud, who they speak to, what information is out there for family members, to friends, and what conversations are we having around fraud, and how can we ensure that those conversations are evidence-informed, that people know where to go to, know who to report to, and that this is a joined-up approach across the public services and the private sector as well. Because a lot of it is good work is being done, especially in the banks. I've been to the bank as well, and all the various checks and questions. But then also there's the other side, which the fraudsters have the script. They can coach the victim over those checks and questions. So it is an arms race. It is a struggle. But I think what we need is a joined-up, concerted effort. One voice, one place, one focus, and that be completely reiterated so that people are constantly have that in the forefront of their mind.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about how, that works with like all the organisations that people trust, like Age UK and, all the youth organisations and stuff like that. Laura, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. So I think, just picking up what Ruth said, I think what's really important is that consistent messaging, and that people then trust where that messaging is coming from is accurate, it's up to date, etc. So we have a campaign calendar across our report fraud services, and our corp comms work really closely with the Met and other people, and like the Home Office Stop Think Fraud, to make sure that that calendar is now going to align. So like we've said, lots of good single points of advice that's taking place, but it's how we bring it together, one voice that then the public can trust. So the campaign calendars are all going to be aligned so that they're consistent in the messaging. You will see it from Report Fraud, you will see it from Stop Think Fraud. It looks very similar. So it's ensuring that people feel confident what they're receiving is correct, it's up to date, and it's the right messaging. And I think that's really important, that consistency.
Do you work with those organisations like I mentioned, and the councils and, all of those people?
Yes, so Report Fraud has been very much a collaborative approach, working with the victim commissioners, victim support, all those type of agencies. We have the brand now with Report Fraud that they can use as part of their messaging that we can share out. So again, giving frontline officers, but also other agencies, that messaging that they know what's current, what's up to date, the protect advice is correct, and any threats and trends that we see that are coming in from the data that we're getting can be updated accordingly. Will?
Yeah, we work with charities, banks, universities, local authorities, dating platforms. We're data-driven in how we do that. So there's times of the year where certain types of fraud offending are more common, and we'll align our campaign so that we can best deliver impact against that threat at a time when it poses the biggest risk to Londoners. I think we are very, very focused in on the Met now on impact. So for me, given the scale of the problem and the resources that we have, this isn't about just doing stuff. This is about doing stuff that's really making a difference for Londoners and that is impactful. So, the intensification around courier fraud, for example, we were very thoughtful around putting the right metrics in place to really understand if what we did was making a difference. So, that's how we were able to get the metrics about the decreasing in offences, the decrease in losses, the reach of the comms campaign. And we're doing much more evaluation around protect messaging. So it's not just about doing protect messaging, it's about are people actually then changing their behaviours? Is anything changing as a result of doing it? So I think we are maturing in our response in terms of we are very, very focused on doing what works so we can be most impactful for Londoners.
Thanks.
Just really quickly, I think there's also a missed opportunity here around when are people really interested in receiving that advice? And it's usually when you've got a problem. And so if you've almost fallen victim to a fraud or a scam, or you have and you've reported it, that is the bit where the individual's interest in their own privacy, their own security is really high. And there's a window of opportunity to deliver the right training and education at that time. And again, I think because we don't have that kind of investigation victim journey, we don't have that delivery right at that point in time, that's where we could probably have a much bigger impact.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
This is just a quick question around education and to your point, Rory, about when and how we do it. So if you look at the advertising world, they have very accurate information about what demographics are, who will buy what, when and where. Are we using the same sort of tools to direct the education piece? Like when students first open bank accounts, or someone saying to them, be wary of fraud. When people go for their mortgage, union fraud. This might sound bizarre, but people log into porn sites all the time. Why isn't it being told at that point you could be, subject to fraud in this sort of arena? When are we targeting, and are we using sophisticated tools to target people in particular vulnerable demographics?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that's quite an exciting area that we've developed with some initial work on romance fraud. So we've got, as I've said, a really rich database of what kind of demographic is more likely to be vulnerable to which kind of fraud. And so we use that to identify, who else is a most likely population, most similar population, most vulnerable. Where do they get their messages, their media? Where do they shop? And therefore, where's the best place for us to try and give us that message? I think you're right in some ways. People often will only look for fraud protection information after the event. So I think there's a kind of a behaviour culture change we're on a journey of. I mean, it's only my 30-year school reunion. There was nothing like this at school when I was at school. There is more kind of schools investment and information given to people at a young age. So there's lots of different places. There's an ongoing pilot working with academia in 2 parts of the country to trial that kind of idea around investment fraud. Who are the vulnerable populations? Who are the most similar populations? And if we really focus on those, what's the impacts? We've got an evidence base about what works and what doesn't. But yeah, absolutely. And that's a really exciting avenue for us to pull together and look at.
The other small thing before I go back to the chair is how do we go about this? You might not be able to answer this question, it's slightly philosophical, without destroying trust in society. One of the biggest things about living in Britain today is we distrust everyone. Unfortunately, this conversation would suggest we should distrust most of what we're seeing. But how do we give those messages without destroying trust? Is that even possible? I understand if you can't answer the question, but it is something that I think about all the time because I deal with young people in whole vulnerable communities, and their big thing is they don't even trust people who they consider a friend.
Yeah, so we heard earlier about crypto investments being backed by certain people, and that's the thought that came to mind is that there's an opportunity for us to use people who are trusted within a demographic as the bridge to get to that demographic. So when we were doing some work on trying to persuade young people to not be drawn into becoming money mules, we work out, well, who's the population we're trying to reach? Who do they look to for information, and who can we recruit then? And we did use influencers in the northeast around Newcastle to try and get that message across. Because, I mean, marketing's not really police officer kind of comfort zone, really. I mean, you could make an argument that a lot of police work is marketing in some ways, or trying to get people's trust and try and persuade them to go in a certain direction. But at scale, we do need to try and draw on those kind of skills and ideas. It's a thorny one. I think it's the right question to ask. How do we get people to trust? Because if we sweep the table clear and have just one brand for our messaging, that's an easier thing for criminals to impersonate, I suppose, is the challenge. And why, as we're all familiar, different people look to different brands, people to trust. And some of the saddest kind of victim stories are the ones where they've been completely isolated from their support network and they have no one to put the phone down, ask that person, what's going on here? I'm completely at sea, and get a kind of a cold bucket of water, a conversation at the right time. So there's lots to pick apart there. Is that enough for a politician's answer? Sorry.
So on that about how to trust, obviously policing itself is going through a trust and confidence crisis. I think that's probably not helped. I think what needs to be done, people trust their local officers much more than they trust the national force. So maybe something around that sort of prevention being very local, being your named officer in your neighbourhood who's out there, you see, you grow to understand and are familiar with. It's about, having the influencers, having the community leaders in the space. But also, one thing we found with our research is that those who had family support, those who were trusted and believed and understood by their family, had far better health outcomes than those who didn't. And so it's about, again, identifying the victims who have their family support and those who don't, giving them that wraparound care so that they do have those, and that will gradually then help that reintegration and rehabilitation in society.
Rory?
I think it's about the communication vehicles as well. I think if you're trying to deliver a message on a social media platform where you can't really trust anyone is who they say they are, who feels safe interacting on social media, clicking links, buying something over social media, we have to get the safeguards in place where we can understand who is real, what is authentic, and have those controls in the first place. Education plays a role, but unsafe platforms and technologies in the first place create the opportunity. So it's really hard to deliver trusted, safe messages on a platform where people don't feel safe.
It's a good point, and it's about who's important to you. I do some work with homeless young people, and we use football teams because their local club is a real touch point for them, but we still do have the advantage that the club physically exists. And I spoke to a young person the other day, and she said she gets all her information by following Taylor Swift. So maybe you want to talk to her publicist. Chair, back to you.
We could write to Taylor Swift, I suppose, see if we can get a response. Thank you. Assembly Member Roberts.
It's been a long time since we had our contractual obligation mention of Taylor Swift in London Assembly meetings. We had a rash of it last year. I wonder why. Can I just ask about the Little Book of Scams? This is for Mr. Lyne. How do you evaluate the impact of the Little Book of Scams series?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. There's a new version of the Little Book of Scams that's kind of like very close to being published. We evaluate it like we evaluate lots of the rest of our Protect messaging. So we'll do a degree of surveying. We're really particularly interested in not just the reach, the number of people that it's reached. We're really interested in kind of like what the impact it may have had. Has it changed behaviour? Has it changed your understanding of the problem? So we'll do a degree of that to understand a baseline beforehand, and then any change afterwards, as we do with. I think in Welcome Development, lots of the Protect messaging and awareness campaigns that we currently do. So yeah, we'll certainly do work.
Thank you. We're very fortunate in one of my patches, which is Richmond upon Thames. We have a man called John Murray, who's a former police officer who now spends all of his time as a police volunteer going around, particularly to older residents, selling the idea of the Little Book of Scams. And he also sends around a very useful breakdown of all of the frauds which have happened. I've got one of his here. 101 number of offences, total lost £630,815.36. That was in August in Richmond alone. Do you know if there's a sort of a network of John Murrays across the capital? And if there isn't, should we be looking into getting them?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like John Murray's doing amazing work in Richmond. No, we have a network of cyber kind of like volunteers within all of the BCUs, within all of the geographical areas of London. So there is cyber and economic crime expertise in all of the BCUs in the Met. So we provide them with specific advice, guidance, materials, so that they can be a touch point for people in the community. No, I'm not aware that we have a kind of like a broader network of volunteers. We are really lucky to have some amazing specials that work really closely alongside us, particularly in areas like arts and antiques and other areas. But yeah, I think it's an interesting idea and it's an interesting concept if they're doing great work in the community, and something we could look into, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, John will tell you himself that he's maturer years, so he does tend to have a degree of confidence with older residents, which is particularly what you want in this sphere. But there we go. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Hall.
This Little Book of Scams, the new one coming out, is it focusing a lot on AI issues?
Yeah, there'll certainly be sections on AI and how technology is changing and how criminals are harnessing that to in their criminal schemes to get at victims.
I look forward to seeing that. And how often are these guides updated?
It's a good question, but every couple of years, I think, is kind of like the level of pace that we're generally updating them. Obviously, lots of time and effort goes into compiling that. So yeah, at the moment, it's around every 2 years.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Assembly Member Desai.
Is to the Met and City Police. How do police services work together to coordinate the promotion of fraud prevention campaigns? If you want to start off the...
So, really well, I would say. There's been a fraud and a cyber prevention resource. There's a path of convergence. There's going to be a new strategy for police protect, we call it. We kind of mean probably what you mean by prevent. Which will be launched in the next couple of months. And that has calendars, that has dedicated events. It's got corporate materials, so we're giving everybody across the country a point to focus on and some core messages and some materials so that they can get into communities. And then the magic is the local officers, the specials, the volunteers, the PCSOs to work out and bring that to life for the local community across radio or physical events and things like that. So, and I think specifically around cyber, the Corporation of London have invested in what they call Cyber Griffin, which is a bespoke cyber prevention and protect set of services for larger businesses. But we don't treat the boundary of the City of London as a kind of a rigid line. And there's some fantastic tools developed by the Metropolitan Police Cyber Protect team as well. And so we share those tools and work to kind of break up London so that we can deliver the best service for the people as they need them. I suppose would be the way I'd see it. But, Will, if you want to...
Yeah, really joined up. Always room for improvement, but really joined up. Localised, so I'll just highlight one, the Be Switched On campaign, where we had a comms campaign around people activating the necessary security features on your phone. So if you are unfortunate enough to be a victim of a phone snatch, you can protect yourself from some of the subsequent fraud that then often takes place on those handsets. Was a particular targeted example where I was out with the team before Christmas out in the West End doing some targeted work around that.
Thank you. And my next question is to the Met. In what ways does the Met evaluate the effectiveness and success of fraud prevention campaigns, specifically the impact in London?
Yes, I think it goes back to where I previously talked. I think we are much more thoughtful around understanding a baseline before we undertake any sort of operational activity, whether it be going out and arresting people or whether it be doing comms, even though lots of that stuff is now we try to do that combined in a really holistic way. So what I really want out of every piece of operational activity that we're delivering is what is the impact. So it's not just about the metrics. We've arrested people, or we've done deployments, or we've reached X number of people through a comms campaign. It's like, what is the difference that we have made so that we can take the learning from that and we can do better next time. So we are really impact orientated in everything that we do. And we have a really great network both within London and nationally to share that learning. I also utilise colleagues from the Society for Evidence-Based Policing who are really big into this kind of impact evaluation work. So enormously impact orientated in all the activity that we're doing, whether it be Protect campaign, whether it be raids on against scammers, whatever it might be.
Thank you very much. We've now come to the end of our questions, but I did want to say, Will, when you were talking about the somebody asking for money on the phone, reminded me of a situation that I had a few weeks ago where I thought it was from my daughter and then realised the message couldn't be because it actually had punctuation in it. And she was most affronted when I told her as well. So I'd like to thank our guests for attending this morning and for the really excellent answers to the questions that we posed. And it really has been such an interesting session. Thank you so much. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Agreed. Can I ask the committee to note its work programme? And the next meeting of the committee, which is also the last meeting of this Assembly year, is scheduled to take place on the 24th of March 2026 at 10 a.m. in the chamber here at City Hall. I have no urgent business, so that concludes today's meeting. Thank you.